Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Okay, everyone, we're going to get started in 1 minute. If you could take your seats, get logged in, refresh your coffee, we're going to get started. Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone. This is the 6th meeting of the Emergency Preparedness and Protective Services Committee of this term of council. Welcome back to everyone. We have a few important items on our agenda today and looking forward to that. I do want to acknowledge that the City of Ottawa is located on the unceded and never surrendered territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe First Nations people. We honor, respect, and recognize that they have been on these lands for millennia. Before my opening remarks, I will turn to our committee coordinator for roll call, please.
Councillor Bradley.
Here.
Councillor DeRush is absent as advised. Councillor Dudas.
I'm here.
Councillor Devine.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Luloff.
Je suis ici.
Conseillère Plante.
Ici.
Vice Chair Hill.
Present.
You have quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, first of all, welcome back. It's great to see everyone. This is our first meeting of the committee since we last met in June. We have several items on our agenda today. The first, it will be the Ottawa Fire Services 2021 and 2022 annual reports. The reports present the service's activities during those 2 particular years, including performance data, which is showing an increased demand for service and a continued increase in the severity of the incidents being responded to. Ottawa Fire Services Chief Paul Hutt will provide a presentation outlining the performance trends and ongoing projects and programs. I do want to acknowledge and congratulate Chief Hutt and all Ottawa Fire Services staff on their ability to continue to provide world-class service to our city. Félicitations, Chef Hutt, et tous les membres du Service d'incendie d'Ottawa. And finally, we will then consider a new clothing donation box bylaw, which includes a permit system and regulations. Councillors and residents have been raising issues surrounding clothing donation boxes, particularly around maintenance and standards. And I'm pleased that this report has remained on the bylaw review work plan. So thank you, colleagues, for that. The proposed bylaw ensures that residents can make more informed choices about where they choose to donate. Je suis favorable au régime proposé et j'espère que vous serez également. Valerie Bello, Manager of Public Policy Development, and David Kirst, the bylaw review specialist who led this file, will also be sharing a presentation with us. Okay, so are there any declarations of interest from any members of the committee? Seeing none. Confirmation minutes, our last minutes, as I said, 15th of June, 2023. Any issues or concerns with the minutes? Seeing none, are the minutes of the 15th of June, 2023 meeting carried? Thank you. Responses to inquiries. There were 2 responses. One was regarding safety-related concerns, dog bites and attacks, and the other was on rooming houses. Any issues to flag? Seeing none, we will continue. Update, item 5.1, status update, inquiries, motions for the period ending 12th September 2023. No speakers, no written submissions for this item. Are we okay to receive this report for information? Received, thank you. All right. Next item is the Ottawa Fire Service 2021-22 annual reports. Both this item and the clothing donation bylaw, we have a presentation, so we'll just proceed in order with this item now. So we do have a staff presentation on this item. No speakers are registered to speak, but we of course will come back for questions from committee members. So Ryan Perot is here. Ryan, shall I yield the floor to you first for opening, or do you want to go straight to Chief Hutt? Go ahead, please.
Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Perot. I'm the Manager of Business Support and Technical Services for Emergency and Protective Services. I'm here on behalf of our General Manager, Kim Ayat, who has another commitment next door at the courthouse. So thank you, Chair. I would like to say a few words before Chief Hutt takes you through the presentation on the report. In 2021 and 2022, Ottawa Fire Services was able to adapt quickly and continue to display excellence in supporting the city's emergency response and meeting standards for response times. The number of incidents continues to increase, but the dedicated team at Ottawa Fire Services always rises to the occasion. Le nombre d'incidents continue d'augmenter, mais l'équipe dévouée des services d'incendie d'Ottawa est toujours à l'auteur de l'occasion. Today, you will hear about some of the ongoing and upcoming initiatives that Ottawa Fire Services is undertaking to make sure they are always there for residents when they are needed. You will also hear about some important work and investments coming to help meet increasing demand due to growth. Thank you. Merci. Over to you, Chief.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, Chair Brockington and committee. Pleasure to be here on behalf of Ottawa Fire Service to present our annual report. If we can have the slide or the presentation, please. Thank you very much. Next slide, please. So the Ottawa Fire Service annual report, the 2021 and 2022 annual report has 4 parts. The 4 parts are the goals and objectives of the Ottawa Fire Service, a description of our organization and the Ottawa Fire Service, fire protection services that we provide, and the levels of service that the fire services provides as well. And this is a requirement as part of our legislation establishing bylaw with the fire services. Next slide, please. Just a summary, and I apologize. So if we can go back to slide 3, there we go. Thank you. It's just an overview of our service. We have a $183 million budget, operating budget, and this comes to no surprise. The area we serve is huge with a large rural application, which is achieved by a composite fire service model that we run. The fire service, obviously, there's a population of 1 million and it's growing. Staff is currently 1,500 staff. Of that, 1.4% is management and administration. We operate out of 45 stations, 25 are urban, 4 are composite, which encompasses urban members as well as volunteers, and there's 16 rural fire stations within the city of Ottawa. Next slide, please. It's important to note that the city of Ottawa is the largest composite fire service in Canada. Comprised of urban and rural firefighters. We also do fire prevention, which includes fire inspections, fire education. The other elements that we do are training and maintenance, which is really important to our service. Communication and dispatch, not only for the Ottawa Fire Service, but we also have contracts with Clarence Rockland and North Dundas. Administration support. We also have a very specialized team within the city of Ottawa that has a provincial response from a hazmat and an urban search and rescue perspective. And then we have a array of specialties from water rescue, water extrication, confined space, collapse and rope rescue, as well as wildland firefighting. Next slide, please. So you'll see in our annual report, there's a lot of data points of with respect to first on scene, effective response force, and effective response force just basically means having enough people on scene to complete critical tasks. And what we've provided here is we have just a snapshot of some of the data that was in our report. When we look at in the city of Ottawa, we have an urban area, which is for every 400 people, for every square kilometer, that is justified as an urban area, and everything else falls within a rural application. You can see first on scene, which means it's the first apparatus that arrives on location. The standard that we have, that we use is 6 minutes, 57 seconds. And in 2021 and 2022, we certainly met that benchmark of first on scene from an urban application. And from a rural application, the standard is 17 minutes 14. And in 2021 and 2022, we were meeting those benchmarks with having the first apparatus on scene. When we look at the next column where it says urban effective response force, and that's where I was indicating where it's in the assembly of personnel to complete that critical tasking. Again, the standard from an urban is 11:45, and we're just meeting that benchmark for arrival. And on the rule side of the responses from an effective response force, the benchmark is set at 24:42, and in both cases for 2021 and 2022, we're meeting those benchmarks from a response perspective. Next slide, please. We do have a changing landscape from a firefighting perspective. We just have to look at the modern designs and buildings that we're facing. Fires are hotter, the building material used, the furnishings are certainly synthetic, plastic material, hydrocarbons, which, creates these intense, dark, black fires that are hot and heat. So what we're seeing is that from the time that we're arriving on location, a lot of these fires are progressing very quickly, and that's why it's very important that when we look at having the first apparatus on scene, that we're meeting those critical benchmarks because fires are spreading quicker and faster based on the building material that's being used. The other considerations are wildfires and their consequences. Risk from wildfires being mitigated with open air fire bans and prevention. And you certainly saw that throughout this year. Whenever the situation's warranted from a weather condition, fire bans were applied across the city of Ottawa. And we have a very progressive fire prevention program with Fire Smart in a lot of our rural and suburb areas. And the changing weather and human activity and green space is increasing these number of fires. And this goes again without saying, we're seeing an increase of power outages, flooding, tornadoes, severe weather events, and ice storms. So how we're mitigating some of these changing landscapes, the Ottawa Fire Service continues to evaluate future levels of service, invest in training, vehicles and equipment and technology. We're working with our communities to increase awareness, and I think that's really important as we move forward, is that making sure residents have an expectation to sustain themselves for at least 72 hours with some of these events that we're seeing. The other aspect that we're really focusing on is supporting our staff from a mental health perspective, from peer support, road for mental readiness, operational support, and those are the aspects that we're looking at to help mitigate some of these situations. Next slide, please. So again, the annual reports provide quite a bit of data. So what we've tried to do here is to summarize the data into a simplified spreadsheet. And when the first item, call volumes for 2021 and 2022, those are contact points either with our communications or our fire prevention division. You can see there's an increase of roughly 7%. We are seeing an increase almost on all fronts from a call volume perspective, which is incident volume. 2021, we had a little bit lower numbers, and I think some of that was equated to COVID. Back in 2022, we're seeing the numbers increase to 28,000, increase of 20%. Apparatus responses, so not all incidences just have one apparatus. We have numerous apparatus based on the calls that we're responding to, based on the incidences that we're responding to. So we're seeing, because of our call volume increasing, we're seeing that number increase as well. Investigated fires, although we investigate all fires that we respond to, we're seeing an increase in, you can see in 2022 with 233, and those are where we dispatch fire investigators to go and do a scene reconstruction to determine the cause and origin of those fires. False alarms, again, we continue to see false alarms increase both in 2021 and 2022. False alarms within the city represents about 34% of our responses. So that's an element that we're continuing to monitor. We're seeing an increase with the medical type responses as well, a 32% increase, and a hazmat, which is hazardous material. And that can pertain to anything from natural gas situations that we respond to, or chemical situations that we experience in the city of Ottawa. Next slide, please. So just in closing, just to have a look back and a look forward, some initiatives that we're working on. The new Station 45 opening in Canada North, which will be serving Canada North, but then West Carleton March as well. It will be a composite fire station where you'll have urban and volunteers operating out of that station. And it will certainly serve the infrastructure and the development that's occurring in that area. Provincial certification, the province announced in 2021 that we were moving to a standardized certification model across the province, which we're certainly very supportive of. By 2026 and 2028 for specialties, we have to have all city staff trained and certified. And we're certainly in a very good position. We've trained, and now it's just a matter of getting that certification for these members moving forward. We've talked about this a little bit, the new training facility project that we're looking at. I often say the training facility that we're working in off industrial now was built in 1977 with former City of Ottawa. There was approximately, it housed and serviced about 500 members. Today, whether we have 1,500 members with this provincial certification. So the team is working extremely hard at looking at the steps that we can move forward to work with potential partners to see this project come to fruition. And the station location study for the City of Ottawa, the last station location study that the service did was in 2015. So there's time for us to update that plan, and it takes a lot of elements into factor about growth, intensification. We talked earlier about first on scene. It also talks about having an effective response force. And so those are all the data points and information that we will be evaluating, so we can come forth to committee with a data-driven, evidence-based recommendation when we move forward about what does the future look at, where future fire stations should be within the City of Ottawa. So that concludes my presentation, but I'm certainly open to any questions that there may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Hutt, very much for your presentation, and Manager Pro for the introductory remarks. Certainly a busy year, the data and all the different types of responses that you've provided us information on. But again, want to thank you, your management team, and all individuals who serve at the Ottawa Fire Services. So thank you very much. On a lighter note, I'll just point out that it was noted the GM couldn't make it today. He is at the courthouse as a witness, not as a defendant. So I think it's important to provide that clarification. So we have questions. Has the order changed? It was the vice chair, and now it's changed on. It's okay. So we'll start with Councillor Plante.
Oui, merci beaucoup, et merci, Monsieur le Président. I just have 3 questions, and they're kind of Ward 12 specific, and one is not. So this summer we saw a lot of forest fires, not just in Canada, but across the world due to climate change. I was just wondering, how did that affect you guys at all? Did some people go and volunteer? Did it maybe affect your resourcing? How is this being taken in your shop?
Thank you, Councillor Chair, through you. Very good question. In the City of Ottawa, and when we looked at the geographic makeup of the City of Ottawa, we do have a large rural agricultural area. So I've mentioned in the past, the City of Ottawa has always identified that as a risk. So we've positioned ourselves with wildland firefighting equipment within our rural areas. We're really well equipped and trained to mitigate. And just a little bit of a difference too, a lot of the fires we're seeing involve dense forests and bush, as where, in the City of Ottawa, it's a lot of agricultural land, so it's a lot of grass cover areas, but we still have significant woodlands, the marble forest, for example, that we have to be aware and be ready to protect as well. So within the City of Ottawa, rural divisions, we're very well equipped to navigate and mitigate those situations. In the way the agreement works within the province of Ontario, and even at a federal level, we were asked by the province of Ontario, so they've asked in Ontario if we had any resources or equipment that we could offer to our support across not only the province but Canada. So we did put our name forward to say we could offer some resources, and then it just gets escalated from a province level to a national level. Even though we've made the request that we could have some resources available without leaving the City of Ottawa vulnerable, we weren't taken up on that option, but they seem to have a lot of redundancy, and they also wanted our services available in case something further within our geographic area available.
Okay, merci. My next question is, you said your call volume for medical had gone up 32%. How much of that was responding to overdoses?
So Our data, so that is a very good question, Chair, through you. Our data, we've always tracked calls that pertain to alcohol, drug abuse, and just more recently, as a result of the opioid situation, we're really starting to gather that data now. Anecdotally, I can say we did a study between the start of the year till June of this year, and fire services, and this is outside of the good working relationships that we have with paramedics and police and all the other first responders. We administered naloxone 80 times, and we are seeing an increase of the administration of naloxone with the medical calls that we're responding to.
So 80 times since June, you've administered naloxone?
So it was from January to June of,
Wow.
Yes, correct.
Okay. And obviously we're seeing an increase in calls for fire service at encampments because people are making small fires. Sometimes those get out of control. I was wondering if that is just localized in Ward 12, or are you seeing more encampment fires across the city?
Again, encampments, and I don't want to say they're new to Ottawa, but certainly they've been really highlighted more recently with some incidences that we've seen. So we're working very closely with city partners to identify where some of these encampments or these situations are located. And so even to a point now within our communication center, we have identified the sites that we're aware of. So when we have first responders respond, they know the situation that we're involved with. I just want to welcome my public information officer, Nick DeFazio. He's here to assist if needed today. So
No problem.
thanks, Nick. So encampments are certainly on fire services radar, and we've identified those locations, and even to a point where we're always available from an inspection perspective if that is necessary as well.
Okay, and then my last question, thank you, by the way, is we have, especially more on the east end of my ward, what I call problematic addresses. So they're landlords who, have kind of abandoned their properties, and they sort of get taken over by squatters, and then they start fires because they're trying to eat or whatever reason. Just so you know, in my budget ask, I'm going to be asking for just to help to sort of better identify the problematic addresses, how the follow-ups are happening. So I may reach out to your office to get some sort of collaboration on that, because I'm finding it's a bit of a 360, social services is involved, often police services are involved, and then building inspection, and then you guys have to respond to a fire. So I'm hoping to get more of a collaborative response with all of our city stakeholders. And anyway, I look forward to discussing this with you in the future, because I know it's got the residents extremely, extremely concerned when these houses get taken over. So merci beaucoup.
Chair, just for you on that, I absolutely believe in a holistic approach, and I think it takes many partners to resolve difficult situations. And I don't think one service in the city has all the tools and the capabilities. So we certainly welcome that opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Vice Chair Hill, you're next.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I will say that before I was in this job as a city councillor, I didn't realize just how busy you guys were. I get the emails now, and I just saw the statistics here. Thank you, to your team, for everything that you do. Because certainly for me, just as a resident of Ottawa, knowing that if I get in trouble within, 6 minutes and 15 minutes, I'm going to see somebody wearing your uniform coming to help me out is pretty reassuring. So thank you very much. I do want to ask about that benchmark. Is it your organization that sets those benchmarks, or does the province set those for you, or how do you determine what is the kind of the end factor there?
Chair, through you, great question, and I should have preferenced that at the start. And we're accredited through the Commission on Fire Accreditation International, which is an international accreditation body that reviews our service and our service levels. In Canada alone, there's only 11 other services that are accredited to that level or to that degree. There's another 14 that are registered, but they're not accredited. So we hold ourselves to a high standard, but it is an international standard that is benchmarked with provinces, nations across the area. So each year we have to provide our data to show if we're meeting certain benchmarks. And if we're not, then we're held accountable to this third party to say, how are you going to correct this? What are your measures? That's where we take their recommendations and come before committee to say, there might be a gap here, and this is a solution that we've found to fix this. So every year we have to do an annual report, and every 4 years we have to get it reaccredited. So it's a very onerous accreditation that we receive.
Thank you very much. A Barrhaven specific question to that point exactly. I know we have Fire Station 47, which is south of the Jock River, but in Barrhaven itself, there's only one interchange to get onto the highway. My question for you is, from a fire operations perspective, does it inhibit operations that you can't use Fire Station 47 to essentially go south on the Highway 416 in order to affect traffic accidents on that highway?
Thanks, Chair, through you. A good question. Certainly from a fire service perspective, when we look at, and you saw the data today, it's about first on the scene, it's about times, it's about assembling an effective response force. And certainly from our service, any opportunity that we can help mitigate and, have a response that is going to help us get there quicker and faster to serve our clients, we're certainly very supportive. You look at the Fallowfield interchange right now, and it is very congested. Certainly, if the interchange that you're suggesting at Barnsdale through Cambrian, it would certainly allow for a speedy response from 47 to not only get onto the 416, but to respond elsewhere. And we saw very similar when the Vimy Ridge Memorial Bridge was installed, where Riverside South now can serve part of Prince of Wales, where before they were coming from Barrhaven, which they had a slower response because it was a longer distance that they had to respond. So certainly emergency fire services would be very supportive of new infrastructure that would help.
Thank you very much. To jump on one of the points that was brought up by my colleague, Councillor Plante, with regards to broader forest fire situation. I know, every time that I bike up Woodruff, I look right and I see this nasty old forest that is sickly, and it just every time I look at it, I don't know whether it needs to be completely repopulated with trees or cleaned up or what the solution is. But there are people that live in there, and my question is, just what's the relationship with the NCC with regards to their land and, fire safety concerns that you might have looking at that from a future fires perspective?
Yeah, Chair, through you. Thank you for that question. We do have a relationship with NCC. Having said that, our best line of defense is fire prevention, and that's our first line of defense. So we can always enter into discussions with NCC, but I feel sometimes we need to take matters into our own hand, and I think that comes from not only from ourselves but also from residents. And anything we can improve from a fire risk perspective, from a Fire Smart program that we deliver, and what it is it's all about educating residents. And even though they may live beside forested areas that may be of concern, there's a lot of elements that we can share with residents of how to protect your own home, how to, instead of, if a fire did occur, instead of having wood stacked close to your house or removing foliage that is around the house. So there's a lot of fire prevention activities that we can help residents within your area that we can share that with them as well to help mitigate in the event of a fire.
Okay, thank you very much. And my last question on that as well is, when you look at prevention, I think it was slide 6, we looked at the key indices that you had in terms of last year to this year. It seemed like there were slight increases across the board. You attributed some of that to perhaps COVID. I would assume probably a little bit of city growth is included in there. I guess my question is, how should I interpret those statistics in terms of the trend? Are those kind of on par with what you would expect? Are there areas in there that we should be concerned about that with certain amounts of investments we could see significant reductions? Or is, a 3 to 7% increase across the board on that something that we anticipate, over the next few years?
Chair, through you, thank you for that question. I think during COVID, we almost have to look at that as an anomaly because practices, things changed. People were outside more and activities, but there's no doubt as the city of Ottawa grows, the population grows, and when the population grows, we're going to see more calls, more incident, more traffic accidents, and even though we do an amazing job at fire prevention, the leading cause of fires across the province of Ontario as well as in Ottawa is cooking fires and discarded cigarettes. So as long as we need to continue to educate, we need to change the way we are working with our residents, whatever modes of communication may not have been working, we need to find different ways that we can get messages out. So as long as we see population increase, we're going to see calls increase as well. So more of that data will be available whenever we look at our station location study, because it really gets into depth with intensification, where the growth is occurring within the city of Ottawa. So I'm very anxious to present that to committee, probably Q1 of 2024.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you to all of your team. It's really appreciated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Councillor Kelly, you're next, and then Devine, Kavanaugh, and Plant for second round. Councillor Kelly.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to Chief for being here today. I have quite a few questions, and I'd like to dig down a little more on the medical related calls that you guys respond to. Up 32%, that seems significant, and I was just wondering if we could break that down a little more in terms of, is that a result of more calls overall, and therefore you're responding to more medical calls? Or is the number of medical calls that you're responding to within your standard operating or standard year increasing? So is the percentage of your work that's related to medical increasing, or what's happening there?
Thank you, Chair, through you. Thank you for that question. I don't think there's a single answer for that. I think there's a lot of elements, and when you look at medical calls that we respond to, we just look at the situation of our healthcare, and we've heard from our paramedic service in the situations that they often find themselves in. And I know fire service is stepping up to help from a medical tiered response agreement, and it's an agreement that we work on annually, and it's an element where we work with paramedic services to see is there calls that we can help assist our residents by responding. So we recently reviewed that tiered response agreement, offering some assistance. When we look from a medical perspective, we have the skills and the ability to be a first response in a lot of our areas, and we have that commitment to do that. I think the other element as well is you look at the population and you look at the trends. We have an aging population, and as a result, we're seeing more medical calls and responses as well.
And with the increase in level zeros with paramedics and ambulances, do you think that that's playing a role in your having to respond to medical calls that perhaps you didn't have to respond to in the past?
Thank you. I believe our service has the opportunity to assist, and that's what we've recently done with updating our medical tiered response agreement, where if residents were traditionally, you would send paramedic services to assist with lift assists. Those are elements where if we have the capacity and the availability, that we can go and help with some of those less critical type responses, which I think at the end will help the citizens of Ottawa.
Okay. And then I've heard from a few firefighters in my community who've been at medical calls but are under certain constraints in terms of what they're able to do. So I don't know the exact details, but I know there are particular medications that firefighters are trained and able to administer, but some are not. So what are the constraints in terms of responding to a medical call, and is there anything that we can do as city councilors to further equip you to deal with some of those issues or increase training opportunities? I'm just wondering generally if you could speak to the constraints you're under when it comes to medical calls and how we could better support you.
Chair, through you, and thank you, and I appreciate the support. We have a real close working relationship with paramedic services. So when it comes to administration of certain elements, such as naloxone, we actually train with paramedic service for that, and we also train with public health. So we have those abilities at our disposal, and I think it's been working extremely well. And if there's anything that we can do to help the residents with any gaps that we're seeing short term, we're willing and able to do that.
Okay, because I've even heard of, this may be wrong, but are firefighters allowed to administer an EpiPen when they arrive on scene?
So right now, as a result of the medication, so we're right now through our designation and our authority, we do not administer EpiPens. We have to follow the practices prescribed by Ministry of Health.
Okay. I think that certainly came to as a shock to me, and I think others, that someone who can administer naloxone could not administer an EpiPen. It seems kind of weird, but anyway, looking forward to trying to find solutions to that. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor. And before Councillor Devine, I get to you, I just wanted to ask a question of clarification. I live about 500 meters from the Brookfield fire station. Let's just hypothetically say I'm at home and I go into a cardiac arrest and there is an available ambulance, but it's at the Rideau Carleton racetrack. It's going to be 12 minutes away. You guys are available at the station. Are you deployed?
So Chair, thank you for that question and that clarification. Absolutely. There's certain criteria within our medical tiered response agreement that if there's a threshold where somebody is in cardiac arrest, not breathing, shortness of breath, then fire services are automatically tiered to those types of calls.
Fair enough. Okay. And it doesn't matter if it's level 0 or not. I think it's a good question that we need to see if there's a correlation between the number of level 0 incidents and more medical calls that the fire service is responding to. But even if there are ambulances available, if there's a serious medical issue, just for the first response, triaging, we send the fire services.
Absolutely. And that's where we work closely, not only with the paramedics, but police services as well, equipped with the defibrillators and the equipment to get that equipment and the resources on scene that we can help as soon as we can for those major incidences.
Okay. Thanks very much. Councillor Devine and then Councillor Kavanaugh.
Thank you, Chair. Chief Hutt, always a pleasure to see you. Nick DeFazio, very good to see you as well. Sorry I'm not there in person. First off, I just want to thank the fire services and the Ottawa Fire Foundation. Myself and a group of councillors got to attend a very lovely and moving memorial ceremony last week for our fallen firefighters. So thank you for your role in that. I was very grateful to participate. Before I get to my questions, a quick little anecdote that I think you'll appreciate, Chief. It was interesting to hear you referring to the challenges faced by all the modern technologies that you have to deal with and building materials. This morning, as I was walking my kids and some other neighborhood kids to school, a cat jumps in a tree, and all the kids know I'm the counselor, and they start yelling at me to call the fire department to come get the cat out of the tree. And I told them that I think you're too busy to respond, but I knew that if you had to respond, you'd respond well within the standard time. So generally, when it comes to your, I just want to commend what your department is doing for meeting these increasing challenges within and below the standard time. I think it's remarkable. And also to a tip of the hat to you, Nick, when we receive the emails that describe the minute-by-minute approach with which you respond to times, it's like reading the opening scene of an action thriller where good comes out of it. So based on the challenge that you are facing with the increased growth, I very much appreciate how you are always able to respond, not on time, but ahead of time, especially considering what an extra minute could lead to. So thank you very, very much for, as you say, rising to the occasion. And Nick, thank you for communicating that so well. Before I get a little bit more into the challenges you're facing, just a few very specific questions. Chief, you mentioned in your presentation that I think I read that 34% of your calls are false alarms. That does seem like that may be the cost of doing business, but that does seem like a very large 34%. That certainly caught me by surprise. To a certain extent, that's wasted time. So my question, Chief, is that percentage, 34%, would that ring true across major cities? So that's my first question. Or is that trend abnormally high?
So Chair, through you, thank you for that question. 34%, 35% for false alarms, that is high. When we do benchmarking or comparisons across the province of Ontario with the all other larger cities, for the most part, have a fire false alarm bylaw to help mitigate some of these situations. What fire services is currently doing is evaluating and reviewing that data. And we actually hope to have a report before committee in Q1 or Q2 of 2024 on the false alarm strategy that we would like to look at for the city of Ottawa. You're absolutely right. That's a lot of equipment and resources running across the city unnecessarily. And I think for myself and our team, more importantly, is if these are false alarms and the equipment there's issues with the equipment, then the people that are staying or the employees or residents that are staying in these locations, then they're not protected if they continue to be false alarms. And that's what we're seeing with a lot of repeat false alarms. So we want to make sure our residents are safe. And by proposing a possible solution with a fire alarm bylaw, we would like to propose that in 2024 to committee.
Great. I mean, I look forward to all of us being able to help you address that strain on your resources. And I'll just assume that whatever kind of analysis that is done on those false alarms may point to trends or patterns, so we can zero in on where the problem areas might be. A few other questions related to the trends that you observed. My colleagues were asking about the spike in medical calls, but I think I saw a spike of 52% in hazmat calls from 2021 to 2022. I'm not sure whether the actual volume of hazmat calls is a big strain, but the percentage of the 52% spike from year to year seemed odd. Is there a particular reason for such a big spike, and is that something that we should be concerned about?
Again, Chair, through you, thank you for that question. The hazmat response, when you actually, and that's a great observation, when you look at the number of hazmat calls on average, the numbers are quite low, so are relatively low. So as soon as there's a few additional calls, that average spikes up quite high. So that's one explanation. The other explanation, what we're seeing is for carbon monoxide calls, some of the trends that we've seen over the last couple of years are carbon monoxide, where when we get into multi-residential units, we often call our hazardous material team in that have special monitoring devices to come and assess that further. And even though each of the apparatus has devices, when we get into multi-residential, it takes a little more investigation often, and we call our hazmat team to just verify the readings to make sure the residents are safe.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that if the volume of calls for hazmat generally is low, then the spike seems high. If I had let those kids make that call, you would have had a 100% spike in calls to get cats out of trees. So I can understand that. One more statistic. I think I saw that you say that among your staff, your management and admin staff makes up only 1.4% of your workforce, which is a remarkably lean, commendable, if not concerning. While I know that many people will tip their hat to the fact that only 1.4% of your workforce is management and administration, to a certain extent, that management and administration is managing the how to handle the growth of demand on your workforce. Is 1.4% sustainable for you?
Chair, through you, Councillor, thank you for the question. Have you seen the amazing staff at Ottawa Fire Service? I work with an amazing team.
I know. I like to praise them all the time.
Yeah, they work so hard each and every day, and you're only as good as the people that you work with. And I have to compliment day in and day out, where every challenge that we're faced with, the team steps up. So right now, we continue to move ahead, facing the challenges we do, and we're very nimble, and we can pivot when we need to pivot. So thank you for those kind words.
Well, I mean, if you're happy with 1.4%, then again, we tip our hat. And I appreciate you referring to the terms of nimble and flexible. Perhaps when it comes to a governance review, then we might come and investigate just how you're able to operate so well at 1.4%. So I guess my big question, Chief, just pertains to so again, I am very, very grateful that you are meeting the performance standards. You do say in your report that you are meeting those standards with difficulty, that I am not at all surprised by. The difficulty is related to the growth that we have anticipated, but we anticipate more growth. And so I can only surmise that there's going to be an increased spike demand for your services. Is there anything, as we look towards the immediate future, is there anything that you can anticipate needing in order to be able to continue meeting these performance standards with additional growth? I'm sure you're not going to be saying you need to increase your management and admin, but generally, are you going to be looking towards a greater contingency of FTEs or expanding your workforce in order to continue meeting these standards through an increased challenge of additional growth?
Thank you. I mentioned earlier, this is all part and parcel of our station location study, which really will be our future investment plan for the city of Ottawa and what that's going to look like. So when we populate the data, and you're absolutely right, when we look at the anticipated growth and development within certain areas, the evidence is going to lead us to some conclusions that, where future fire stations are going to have to be located. But our investment plan is also going to include support positions as well, because as good as our fire service members are responding to emergencies and calls, there's a lot of hard work that goes on behind the scenes, from a training perspective, from a maintenance perspective. So as we move forward with our 2024 station location study, which will also encompass our investment plan moving forward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Devine and then Plante.
Sorry, did you say my name?
Yes, I do. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Kavanaugh.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chief, for your report. As always, we really appreciate it and appreciate all your work, especially Station 22. See them all the time, and they've done a great job. It's been a busy summer with rescues on the water and so much more. So appreciate it. I also appreciate the communications, and since you don't have much administration, but it is great that you reach out to us and let us know what's going on, because first thing we have to do is tell residents, because they want to know how come, what's going on and how's it going, and when they see fire trucks racing through their community. So that is very helpful. Councillor Devine was already asking about the false alarms. I couldn't help but notice, and I did ask last year about them as well, and to see them go up again is concerning. And I'm really appreciating the fact that there's going to be a false alarm data strategy for next year. That'll be helpful. Is there any sneak peeks you can say about what you see as a trend? Because obviously it's going up. What do you see as the most concern in terms of the false alarms?
Chair, through you. Thank you, Councillor. I do believe some of the trends that we are seeing, and part of the program that we're going to be looking at is once a site has been identified, it seems like we're getting repeat offenders to certain locations, and this is not to penalize for malicious, or if there is a fire condition. Residents and businesses aren't going to be penalized for those situations. It's where often we see equipment is starting to expire or fail and it needs to be replaced. And some of the property owners, and this isn't for everybody, I'm just saying we're seeing some repeat, is where equipment is starting to fail, needs to be replaced, and for whatever reason it either gets delayed or it gets postponed. And so to my point earlier, where this is also from a fire life safety perspective, where we want to have operating fire detection systems within commercial and industrial establishments. And so it's important to us that if there is malfunctioning equipment, that it gets fixed as soon and as quickly as possible. to make sure we protect the residents. So we're seeing multiple calls, and one of the situations is that equipment is starting to fail. It needs to be upgraded, and it's just a matter of getting those wheels in motion to have that completed. So.
Thank you. Are you saying it's more in multi-residential buildings or in commercial buildings? It's not coming from individual homes.
No, and that's a good distinguish between the two. It's not single family dwelling homes whatsoever. A commercial fire alarm system is a system where we often refer to smoke alarms, and in our home we have smoke alarms. In an institution or a commercial premise, they have a smoke alarm, which is connected to a fire panel. So it's a complex system that's installed. So it could be multi-residential complex that has a fire alarm system. It could be a commercial property that has a fire alarm system. But it is not, these numbers do not relate to individual residential dwellings.
Okay. Yeah, no, when I'm down at City Hall and I see the fire trucks racing by, I wonder, is this a false alarm? Because it seems often and you don't hear anything. So you assume nothing happened. And as stated, it's a waste of wonderful resources. So I hope we can work together as a city to help on this with bylaw to strengthen whatever regulations need to be, so people, so property owners pay attention to this major inconvenience. So thank you. I just want to say that I appreciate the efforts on recruiting women and gender diverse persons, as well as working on diversity in your recruitment. I see that it's slowly getting better. I know it's tough, and I appreciate the the camps that you have, so it's very positive, and I think it really does help the image of the fire services to go in that direction. I don't know if you want to make any comments on that.
Thank you, Chair. Absolutely. The Ottawa Fire Service is extremely committed and supportive of having a workforce that does represent our community. And there's been a lot of positive initiatives, and we're certainly trending and moving in the right direction. And not to get complacent, there's always so much more work to do. Very proud to say, first time ever in the Ottawa Fire Service, when we look at that 1.4% of administration and management, 43% of our senior fire leadership team are women in the fire service and holding deputy chief positions. And it really serves for a very diverse and a very welcoming work environment. And it has to start at the top. So I think from a leadership team, we're leading by example, and we look for many more opportunities in the future.
Thank you. And I appreciate also the emphasis on prevention. And again, anything that the city can do to help encourage that. Of course, we're willing partners, so that you're not, because lives are at stake, and anything we can do to encourage people to check their smoke alarms, etc., and just have good practices at home. I appreciate that, and I appreciate your work with Ottawa Public Housing, or Ottawa Community Housing. So I just wanted to pass that on. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you for those questions. I'm going to continue to go to first-time speakers first. So Councillor Johnson, you're next, and then Plant and Kelly. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you very much. So thank you for your presentation and your briefing today. I appreciate your department's time in working with me for an inquiry that sort of lends itself to Councillor Kavanaugh's curiosities. I'm also very interested in understanding the progress that Fire Services is making in its equity, diversity and inclusion targets. Because of that first response, I mean, we're welcoming so many new refugees and immigrants. We're dealing with intimate partner violence. We're, having an increased aging population. We want to know that the people who are serving them are representative of them, because when you're feeling very vulnerable, you want to know that you've got something in common, something to connect over, and that's why representation really matters, right? So I'm encouraged by that. I think the fire service is especially curious because of the voluntary aspect of it as well. I mean, it's a really interesting governance model, and so with such a spread of so many stations, how do you manage? When you say it comes from the top, but you have a lot of I don't want to say a lot of bottoms, but you got a lot of bottoms too, right? So it's how do you make sure that those corporate values are being shared all the way through the organization and through those voluntary groups as well, who perhaps have less contact or less frequent contact with that leadership. So I appreciate your energy in working with me on that inquiry, and hope that we can have sort of a more forthcoming reporting analysis through corporate services here about that type of progress. So my questions today are related to a couple of things. So one, I'd be curious if you could please unpack for us a little bit what you see when it comes to traffic accidents. So I know that in Bell's Corners, we have, the home of the extracurricular service training center, which is lovely, but I'd love if it was never used. Are you seeing any trends with traffic accidents in terms of their speed, their severity, their locations, what kind of roads they're on, their frequency?
So that's an excellent share through you, sorry. That's an excellent question, and I certainly probably a question better served from our transportation group that does the analysis, but just from a fire service perspective, from what we're seeing, I certainly look, or what we hear is distraction. People are preoccupied. They're not paying attention when they're on the road, and so we see a lot of distracted drivers that are unfortunately involving vehicle accidents. So certainly from a fire service perspective, that is what we're seeing. People are so many things on the go, and they're not paying attention to the road safety aspect of things.
When I was at the training center earlier this year, I was talking to your staff in that team, and they were saying that it is a proportionately significant number of calls that you guys get for traffic accidents. Is that correct?
Yes, you just listen you listen to the radio every day, and we're out every day for traffic accidents. Some obviously minor, but then we're also responding to those serious ones where we have the skills and the equipment and the ability when the situation arises to safely extricate and remove people from those cars. But there's not a day that we don't go without a car accident. That's for sure.
So yeah, that's good to know from a resources perspective, and also for a liability perspective for the city of Ottawa when we come to our road design and how we support road safety. So we have costs associated with road safety everywhere, and it includes with our fire services and the resources there. So always of interest to me. The other one I was curious about was your investigated fires. So in College Ward, actually, we had again, not dissimilar to how statistics look big, but it looked like we went up in arson by a sort of notable amount of arsons. And I was just wondering, is that something you could comment on for the city of Ottawa, or, I mean, College Ward, maybe not specifically, but when you were when Stephanie Plant was describing, someone going in a home and trying to, get warm and setting a fire and or cooking on a fire that gets out of hand, is that considered arson, or is there a deliberate nature to arson that makes that a different category? And what trends are you seeing, please?
Chair, through you, thank you for that question. One, I have a discussion with our Fire Prevention Bureau quite a bit. When I first started in the fire service, when you heard arson, it was that deliberate, it was that intent. Somebody wanted to damage property and hurt people. But the way the definition reads, it says in an intentionally set. So what we're seeing and why we're seeing those increased numbers is we're seeing a lot of mischief, and I refer to them as mischief fires, where they're intentionally set. So they're fitting that definition, but it could be a waste paper basket in the street. So that would technically be classified as an arson fire. Was there intent to necessarily hurt somebody? But what we're just seeing is accidental, accidental, intentional lighting of articles. So there is a little bit of a distinguishing between, like what would be perceived as an arson fire. We have an arsonist, and we're always aware, and we're always plotting and tracking all our fires, and we work very closely with Ottawa Police if in the event that we do see trends that should be raised to a more of a criminal level, which we do work closely with police on.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. I had asked for a bit more information from Ottawa Police in terms of that, but hadn't received that information. So I appreciate your time. And my final question, thank you, Chair, is when it comes to recruitment, so how healthy is your applicant pool? Are you seeing a lot of people that are wanting to be firefighters? Are you turning them away? Do you have waiting lists?
Chair, through you, thank you. Two elements. We have because we have a broad 500 volunteers within the city of Ottawa. And then we also have the urban recruitment, certainly on the rural side of from a retention perspective. I don't want to say it's hit and miss, but we're always having people step up for the position, and there's a lot of discussion across the nation right now about retaining volunteer firefighters. And I certainly don't want to boast, but we're very fortunate just based on our geographic area, the intensification of some of our communities, that we're seeing a very healthy recruitment from a volunteer perspective, and we're able to retain those members. So we're not seeing the same trends that we're seeing, across the nation from our volunteer recruitment. And then from our urban recruitment as well, there's at any given time, we're receiving up to 1,000 applicants for, when we hire at any point from anywhere from 24 to potentially 50 members a year.
And I just wonder, with that, are you seeing any trends when it comes to other emergency service personnel wanting to move over to fire? I've heard anecdotally that this is something we're starting to see when demands are really, you have a different hourly structure and how you complete your work week and things like that. You get maybe catch your breath a bit more comparatively, anecdotally. Can you comment on whether there's a trend like that happening that we should be aware of?
I certainly hope people would want to move to fire services because it is the best service. No, with that, no, with all joking aside, with that being said, I certainly don't have any data on that. But we've also had firefighters that have said they want to change their career aspirations, and they move to police or vice versa. So we certainly see applicants from police services right across the country, as well as from paramedic services, and we also see a little bit the other ways, going the other way as well.
I just wonder, and sorry, thank you, just this follow up. If you were to see an increase in trend from a different service, would you notify the chief? Like, how would they know that they're seeing people wanting to switch out? That's my concern. Because of course we have, a retention problem in the police, and it's sort of a recruitment challenge, right? So do you guys work together on that?
Yeah, I think we certainly have a very close working relationship within EPS, and we talk all the time, and we have updates. When you look at our recruitment process, it becomes and that was part of our restructuring of our recruitment process. It becomes a non-bias. With reference to if somebody applies from another division to our service, there's nothing that we let them go through the process, because we do want to make sure it's fair, transparent, and equitable. And so with reference to having discussions, we don't normally have those discussions. If there's huge trends where we're seeing 50 or 100 applicants, absolutely, but we're certainly not seeing that for sure.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Plant, you're next, and then Councillor Kelly, and any other councillor who hasn't spoken yet. This will be a last call because I would like to move on to the next item. Councillor Plant.
Yes, thank you. So I'm not sure if you're aware, but on Monday, Ottawa Public Health declared like a crisis for the opioid situation in Ottawa. I'm not sure how that works to declare an emergency versus crisis. I'm just sort of putting that into context for my next question. So I was wondering if, and I'm not sure if this is like an inquiry that I have to do formally, but if we could get the numbers as to how much it costs to respond to an overdose, like the truck leaving the station, the hourly wage of the firefighters, whatever equipment they may use, and the truck going back. So that way we can kind of just get a grasp as to what this is costing our frontline personnel, both just in terms of manpower and numbers.
Thank you for that, Chair, through you. Thank you for that question. I believe, if an inquiry came to staff, we would be able to review that data and populate that information, and we could have some information returned back to you.
Okay, I'll send that along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kelly, back to you.
Thanks, Chair, and I appreciate you wanting to keep this going, especially this after sitting through yesterday's marathon planning and housing meeting. I apologize, Chief, if you did address this, but I think I can speak for every one of my council colleagues who was there that day that going and having that experience at the training facility for the Ottawa Fire Service was awesome. But I do think there was one moment where we kind of all looked around at each other and didn't know what to think. And that was when we were told that due to new development on the property next door, that you would be limited in your ability to train firefighters at that location in the future, and that you were searching for a new location for a training facility. And I don't think I heard you touch on that, but again, my apologies if you did mention it. I just wanted to know if there was any updates you could share in regards to that situation and locating a new facility for training.
Chair, through you. Thank you for that question. Certainly, there are pressures at our current site. With the residential condominiums that are being built in and around the training center, as a temporary short-term fix where we can do some live burning. We've entered into an agreement with our colleagues in and around the landfill site. So we do have some short-term solutions on Barnsdale, where we do our live burning at that location, which allows us less restrictive at our current location. So that's our short-term solution, and we continue to work closely with our BSS colleagues on the project of identifying not only land for the location, but also what that funding model might look like moving forward, and also within a recent expression of interest that we did to see what other partners that we might be able to partner with for this facility moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lulov, good to see you. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I'll be brief. Chief Hutt, I just want to give a shout out to the rural firefighters, especially those in Cumberland Village. During the flooding incidents this year, the wellness checks that these women and men did, the constant presence in the community, the volunteering of their time as community members after hours to help with sandbagging of property was unbelievable. I mean, I've spoken with Larry and thanked him for that support. But because you're here in front of us today, I wanted to extend that gratitude. The Cumberland Community Association has been working with our local station in Cumberland on setting up an emergency response group. They've been wonderful to work with. This is an incredible group of professional members, and I just want to give a shout out to our rural firefighters for their great work. Your outreach activities, notably at Station 53 on Charlemagne, have been absolutely unbelievable. And just want to thank you for your great work on fire prevention. And thanks again for another great year of service.
Thank you for those kind words. And absolutely, the city is so fortunate to have such a group of 500 dedicated volunteers that serve our municipality, and we are very fortunate. We wouldn't be the department and the successful service that we are without them. So thank you for those kind words.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Luloff. Chief, thank you for the reports and update. We'll ask some tougher questions next year, I promise. And before I go, you recognize Mr. DeFazio, but I just want to add my 2 cents. The proactive, informative, timely updates that we get at all hours of the day are very much appreciated. So we want to respect the work that you do. You certainly complement what the OFS does, and you help us do our jobs as well. So thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay, so committee members, do we receive this report for information? Is that received? I need to hear from someone. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair. That matter is received. Thank you. Okay, item 6.2 is the clothing donation box bylaw review. We'll have staff switch over. So colleagues, we will have staff provide a presentation. We did receive 1 written submission from the Hintonburg Community Association, which is in the shared directory, and we do have 1 delegate who will speak on behalf of Diabetes Canada. Mr. Pro, I will turn to you first to introduce your team.
Great, thank you, Chair. Today, the Public Policy Development Team is here to present the review of the city's clothing donation box bylaw, which includes the recommendation for a new bylaw and permit system for the operation of clothing donation boxes in Ottawa. This work is included on this term of council's bylaw review work plan that was previously approved by both committee and council. With me today are Valerie Bietlow, the manager of our Public Policy and Development team, as well as David Kurz, a bylaw review specialist. Valerie Bietlow et David Kurz vont expliquer les conclusions et les recommandations proposées. Also supporting them is Joshua Davis, a bylaw review specialist as well, who will assist in answering any of your questions today. I would like to turn it over to the team for their presentation. Thank you.
Merci, Ryan. Bonjour, Monsieur le Président. Bonjour, membres du comité. The new regulatory regime we are presenting today for clothing donation boxes builds on Council's 2013 bylaw. The new regulations will address ongoing concerns such as property standards and property maintenance issues, transparency about box operators and who the donations are benefiting, and improvements with respect to how boxes are placed on property, ideally with the owner's consent. We have consulted with box operators and owners throughout our work on this file and engaged with community associations, business improvement areas, as well as the general public. We have also collaborated with other city departments and services on our recommended permit approach, including recreation, cultural and facility services, solid waste services in the Public Works Department, the Corporate Real Estate Office in Planning, and the Corporate Accessibility Office. And we thank our colleagues for their expertise and their collaboration. Nous remercions toutes les directions générales et tous les secteurs d'activité pour leur collaboration et leur soutien lors de notre travail. Je vais maintenant céder la parole à David. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Valerie. So before outlining the proposed new regulations, I'd like to provide a brief outline of the current regulatory state for clothing donation boxes in Ottawa. The current clothing donation box bylaw has been in force since 2013 and sets out minimal regulations and requirements for the location, signage, and maintenance of clothing donation boxes located outdoors on private non-residential property. The bylaw does not require operators to self-identify or to provide any information to the city prior to installing a box at a private property location. Based on the information we have today, it appears that current operators are primarily registered charitable organizations. However, staff are also aware of other types of operators, including textile recycling companies and secondhand thrift stores who may also partner with one or more registered charities. Overall, staff are aware of approximately 10 different types of operators, or 10 different active operators, and estimate that there are approximately 200 to 300 boxes located on private property. Donation boxes at our city facilities are currently managed separately through individual agreements between the operator and the city. These agreements are overseen by staff in the city's corporate real estate office and the planning, real estate, and economic development department. Pursuant to a council decision from 2012, a box operator must possess a valid CRA charity registration number in order to operate a donation box at a city facility. Currently, there are 2 registered charities operating boxes at 6 different city facilities. Next slide, please. Despite the 2013 bylaw, ongoing issues within the community have persisted. Firstly, the accumulation of donated items, waste, and debris causing a mess at donation box locations has resulted in property standards and maintenance issues, and in addition to creating nuisances within the community. Issues of exterior waste and debris at box locations have accounted for the vast majority of clothing donation box related service requests received by the city since 2013. Secondly, there have been issues with the lack of overall accountability and compliance from operators with existing regulations. This includes issues such as displaying accurate or incomplete information about the operator and their charitable status or partnerships, boxes being placed on private property without the consent of the property owner, and reports of theft, vandalism, and dumping at box locations. Concerns have also been raised about the types of organizations that should be eligible to operate boxes in Ottawa. There have been complaints from charitable operators regarding for-profit or non-charitable operators inaccurately portraying themselves as registered charities, creating uncertainty about who is actually operating the box and benefiting from the items being donated. Lastly, staff have also noted the potential benefits that clothing donation boxes may have with respect to informing future city policies for textile waste diversion. Looking at ways to enhance textile waste diversion opportunities was identified in the high-level long list of options as part of the development of the city's new solid waste master plan.
Nous nous sommes aussi penchés sur les bienfaits que pourraient apporter les boîtes de dons de vêtements quant au réacheminement des déchets textiles. Et en fait, nous espérons que les rapports annuels que nous proposons portant sur les données relatives à la collecte et au réacheminement viendront éclairer les futures politiques de la ville sur le réacheminement, justement, dans le cadre du plan directeur. Next slide, please. Pour résoudre aux problèmes actuels, le personnel recommande de mettre en œuvre un nouveau régime réglementaire pour l'exploitation de boîtes de dons de vêtements à Ottawa. On a tâché de réaliser un équilibre entre l'application de ces règlements pour veiller à ce que les exploitants de boîtes de dons soient redevables de l'état de leur boîte d'une part, mais aussi en veillant d'autre part à ne pas surréglementer ni créer un fardeau trop lourd pour les exploitants responsables.
The key to staff's new recommended regulatory approach is the implementation of a permit requirement. To obtain a permit, box owners must provide the city with prescribed information and documentation, such as confirmation of box locations, proof of consent from property owners, proof of any registered charity or nonprofit corporation status, as well as confirmation of box safety. The permit requirement and all associated regulations would apply to boxes on both private property and at city-owned facilities. For increased consumer protection, updated signage requirements are recommended to ensure that all information displayed on a clothing donation box is accurate and transparent. A validation sticker issued by the city would also be placed on each approved box. To address public health and safety, the regulations will require that all box locations be safe and have adequate lighting at all times. No boxes will be allowed in the city right-of-way or on residential property, and boxes will be prohibited from creating a visual obstruction for vehicles and pedestrians. To help mitigate community nuisances, permit holders would also be required to ensure that all of their boxes are emptied, inspected, and serviced on a regular basis, and that they are safe, kept clean, and free of overflow at all times. Lastly, staff are recommending a new data reporting requirement to help inform future city initiatives regarding textile waste diversion. As part of the annual permit renewal process, permit holders would be required to provide specific collection data to the city's solid waste services branch with respect to the total tonnages of items collected through their donation boxes and related diversion information. Next slide, please. So for city facilities, staff recommend that boxes continue to be permitted at city facilities under the new system to ensure a consistent approach for all boxes and provide mechanisms and tools for enforcement and compliance. Clothing donation boxes would only be permitted at specific pre-approved city facilities that meet certain criteria assessed by staff in advance. This includes ensuring the facility is open to the public and that it can provide a safe, well-lit, and easily visible, as well as properly accessible exterior location for a donation box on site. Staff have identified 8 different city facilities that meet this criteria and which will be available as part of the initial rollout of this new program. Regulations would allow for new facilities that meet the same safety and accessibility criteria to be added, and facilities could also be removed if the location is no longer suitable for a box. Operation of boxes at city facilities would be restricted to permit holders who are registered charities. This would be consistent with Council's decision from 2012. And this is in contrast to private property where there are no eligibility restrictions being recommended. Allocation of space at approved city facilities would be done through the use of a lottery process administered by staff and bylaw and regulatory services. 2 of the facilities currently hosting a box have been identified as an approved facility under the new system. Existing operators would continue to operate their box at these sites, provided they obtain the required permit. Boxes at all other existing facilities would be removed, and staff are recommending that impacted operators each be allocated space at an additional city facility. Next slide, please. The following are the 8 city facilities that are being recommended for inclusion in this new regulatory system. As noted, this list is subject to change as the Director of Bylaw and Regulatory Services would have the ability to add a facility should the recommended criteria be met and in consultation with the General Manager of Recreation, Cultural and Facility Services. A facility could also be removed if it is determined that the location is no longer suitable for a box.
Nous recommandons d'inclure dans le nouveau régime réglementaire les 8 établissements de la ville énumérés sur cette liste. Nous proposons aussi que le directeur des services de règlement municipaux aurait la possibilité d'ajouter des établissements si les critères recommandés sont respectés et en consultant avec les autres départements impliqués. On pourrait aussi retrancher cette liste si les établissements, si on constate que ces établissements ne se prêtent plus à l'installation d'une boîte en question. Next slide, please.
Administration and enforcement of the new recommended regulatory system will be overseen entirely by staff and bylaw and regulatory services. This includes reviewing applications and issuing permits, working with permit holders and property owners to address any issues, as well as overall monitoring and enforcement of the regulations. Staff are recommending a $500 annual permit fee, as well as an additional annual fee of $150 per box operated by a permit holder. As an example, an operator with 25 boxes would pay approximately $4,300 per year. These fees will provide revenue to fund the administration, management, and enforcement of the new permit regime and accompanying regulations. The Director of Bylaw and Regulatory Services would also be able to suspend or revoke permits if there are continual issues of noncompliance, as well as remove and store hazardous boxes with the ability to recover costs from both box owners and property owners as needed. Next slide. Staff are recommending that the new bylaw and related regulations come into force on January 31st, 2024. This will provide sufficient time for outreach and education to potential permit holders and members of the public, and allow staff from Bylaw and Regulatory Services to develop administrative processes to intake applications. A formal lottery for the allocation of space at approved city facilities to eligible permit holders will also take place on a date to be determined after the new regulatory system comes into force.
Nous comptons mettre au point une page web d'information sur le site ottawa.ca afin de décrire dans leurs grandes lignes les nouveaux règlements et les nouvelles exigences. Cette page web pourrait aussi comprendre une liste d'exploitants de boîtes de dons approuvées. On espère aussi établir une carte sur le site web qui permettra aux résidents de consulter les points d'installation des boîtes de dons de vêtements sur tout le territoire de la ville.
EPS staff will also develop an informational webpage on ottawa.ca to outline the new regulations and requirements. This webpage may also include a list of approved operators. As well, we are hoping to build an interactive map where residents can search the location of approved clothing donation boxes across the city. This concludes our presentation, and we would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Appreciate your work on this file. And I'm sure there'll be some questions in a moment, but we do have a public delegation on this matter. Mr. Simon Langer from Diabetes Canada. And I assume it is virtual. Okay.
Hello.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I was just having a little technical delay there.
You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and then I don't know if it's our audio here, but if you could please speak to the mic as close as possible, and if we can increase the volume, that would be great. You have 5 minutes, sir. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Chair, respected members of the Emergency and Preparedness Protective Services Committee. I really appreciate your time this morning. My name is Simon Langer. I am the National Manager of Government and Strategic Partnerships at Diabetes Canada. I'm here to speak to you all about some of the recommendations that have been put forward by staff. Firstly, we just like to say that we found staff to be highly collaborative, and for the most part, we are in agreement with the majority of the recommendations that have been put forth to you all today. However, we do have one significant concern, which are the fees that are being put forward. I can't see the deck, so I would ask if the PowerPoint can be kindly shared. Thank you. So, of course, we're hoping to work together to drive our collective social and environmental impact, and we're here to discuss the bylaws and licensing of the bins. Next slide, please. First of all, we wanted to provide you all with a very short synopsis of what the social and environmental impact is of the bins that we currently have situated in the city of Ottawa. I will be speaking quickly, but should there be questions after, I'm happy to discuss that. From January to August of this year, thus far, Diabetes Canada has collected and diverted 183,671 pounds of textiles, which are diverted from landfill. Of those collections, 95% are going to be either reused and or repurposed. From a climate change perspective, we provided you all with a life cycle analysis of those materials, which has been conducted by York University. So as an example, the abated carbon that is displaced through those collections accounts to the LCA impact, is 1,862 tons of CO2. The water saved is the equivalent of 308 kiloliters of water. It is the equivalent of 88,521 trees planted and removing over 400 cars from the road. From a social impact perspective, those collections have allowed our charity so far this year alone to send 28 children to our diabetes decamp program for children that are impacted by type 1 diabetes. Next slide, please. We're here to talk about cost. So while we're in agreement with, again, the majority of all the regulations that have been put forward, in fact, some of those regulations were put forward by ourselves in conjunction with staff, we do feel that the fees that have been put forth are highly expensive compared to other jurisdictions. And please kindly keep in mind that we have over 4,000 donation bins situated across Canada. So all in all, this is, again, on average, when you calculate all the costs reported by staff through the report, we believe that there is one item that is left off, which is the cost of the reporting structure that is being recommended. So while we're in favor of sharing the data collection, which we think is imperative, there is a cost to our charity for that, which we put forward as approximately $1,000. All in all, this cost estimate is just slightly over $7,000. I will admit that there was a small typo. It should read $7,350, I believe. In addition to that, we'd like all of the fellow councillors to please keep in mind that we also take on the cost of illegal dumping at our donation bins. And for the most part, not in all cases, but in many cases, those costs are incurred because many residents, which we believe are approximately 10% of the general population, are trying to get around tipping fees. And as a result of that, they place these illegal items next to our bin. And in Ottawa, in specific, we estimate that fee this year to be approximately $4,000. All in all, those fees accumulate to over $11,000. That's $11,000, which are 100% charitable dollars. That does not include the costs that we do to collect, our staff, our drivers, our insurance going up, and all the other rising costs that ourselves, municipalities, and others are currently dealing with. Next slide, please. Also, in addition to that, while we do understand the recommendations are put forth because it is a cost savings endeavor where you're looking to capture the costs that are incurred through this regulation, we would like to address the fact that there is significant cost savings for the City of Ottawa through our textile diversion program. We are currently partnered with York University on a national textile diversion study for the past many years. And Dr. Calvin Lacken, it would be his pleasure to work with the city and ourselves in order to articulate the exact dollar amount for which the city is actually saving. And we believe that those savings are very considerable in the many, many thousands upon thousands of dollars. And it should also be noted that currently there are jurisdictions in the province of Ontario that actually provide us with a subsidy. So there are jurisdictions for which we receive significant amounts of money, again, thousands of dollars, because of the data that we provide to them, because it is understood that this data and our work support their long-term sustainability, circular economy, reuse, repurposing, and also the health priorities of their particular region, which we do believe is similar to the City of Ottawa, essentially in almost all respects. So while cost savings is imperative, and we do understand that, it is also critically important that those costs are being calculated from a 360 view perspective. Like, what is the actual true cost when one takes a look at the services that we are providing? Next slide, please.
I'm just going to jump in. We have come to the end of your allotted time for the presentation. I do want to give you an opportunity just to have some wrap-up comments, and there are already some committee members with questions for you. So could you just wrap up your presentation in a few brief words?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Chair. My apologies. It is a little bit more trying than being there in person, I admit. So I'm sorry for that. Yeah, so there's some important considerations that we're hoping that you all would kindly consider. Again, we are 100% agreement. We're in 95% agreement on all other aspects of the regulations. Number one, we want to point out that in our experience of working with 230 municipalities across Canada, one of the major challenges is enforcement. And so there are fees that are being asked to be paid. However, in most cases, not specifically speaking to the City of Ottawa, we have found that we pay fees, but then there is no enforcement of these rules and regulations. And so therefore, there are many illegal, what we call charitable imposters, who place bins in areas for which they're not allowed. And that continues to be the case. Secondary to that, we were wondering if you all would kindly consider a limit, like putting a limit on the amount of dollars that charities should have to pay. So for organizations like ourselves, while we're fortunate to have many donation bins, and that's through the generosity of our municipal partners, including the City of Ottawa, as well as our corporate partners across your municipality, etc., we do believe that there should be consideration that charities should not pay the same fees as for-profit entities. There's many examples for which we're happy to have further dialogue and to provide those documents to staff as well as to yourselves, where in many jurisdictions, for-profit enterprises do pay higher allotments, and one potential thought is that it's those fees that should perhaps make up the difference or the reduction that you would provide to the charitable entities. So
okay, I'm just going to jump in now, if I may, just because you've well passed the allotted. So
my apologies.
It's okay. I have some colleagues that have questions for you, so there'll be an opportunity to expand on your thoughts. Councillor Devine, you just came off the list. Do you not want to speak?
Oh, I want to speak.
Okay, Councillor Devine, go ahead, and then Councillor Plante.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation, Simon, because effectively you are raising the main area of concern that I had with this proposed amendment to the bylaw. And I believe that I'm very supportive of the general proposals of the bylaw, but it's how it impacts the charitable sector that I'm concerned. And I'm thinking about some comments that my wise colleague, Councillor Johnson, often makes when she refers to our relationship, the city's relationship with community associations and communities, where they are our partners in advancing many of our goals, but we often have a relationship with them where we're acting counterproductively to a supportive principle. And I feel that to a certain extent, that's what's happening here. As you aptly described, the charitable sector is providing a tremendous benefit to society as a whole, but you even illustrated that to a certain extent, the charitable sector is helping the city out with meeting our own waste diversion targets. So I guess a few questions I have for you. In my briefing that I had from staff, I raised the question that you did of why are we charging the same rate for charitable registrations as for-profit registration? Because I agree with you, in principle, we should not be doing that. What staff told me is that charitable boxes represent the vast majority of bins in the city of Ottawa, and therefore your proposal to have there be an offset in registration fees that could pay for the difference. We might not be able to attain that if the amount of for-profit boxes are as small, but that said, the principle still exists. So you had mentioned several items which seem different than what we're proposing. You mentioned that several cities pay subsidies to charitables. You mentioned that in your experience, having 4,000 bins across 230 municipalities, I think you are referring to the fact that we are on the high end in terms of fees. And so what I wouldn't mind is if you can email me, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to do that, some additional information on what does this look like across the nation, where which cities are paying subsidies, which cities are charging a lower fee for charities and for profit. But just for our sake right now, can you, where do we stand across the country in terms of which cities are charging more and which cities are charging less for charities?
Thank you so much for your comments, Councillor, and for your respected questions. They're much appreciated. In trying to summarize these details for you all as quickly and as efficiently as possible, for which I might have failed, my apologies. I had left out some of those critical details in terms of where you sit. So again, the reason that it's of great concern to us is because I do believe that the regime that's putting forth in terms of the fees would actually be the highest in Canada. So, and that includes, again, some of the other larger municipalities across the country. So one thing that some of the municipalities do is that they do have like a licensing fee, for example. Can you all hear me? Okay, cool. Some municipalities do charge like a licensing fee. So let's say $150 or $120. Actually, I believe like the city of Toronto is slightly around that number. So let's say it's $150, but then on renewals, meaning like the second time around, that the following years there's actually a significant reduction. So it's usually, I just going to read some examples to you here that I have noted. So I have like City of Brantford. They charge $100 for a new license fee, and then it's $25 for a fee, for a bin. The City of Toronto gives a discount for all new after you pay the first initial fee for the first year. Secondary to that, then you pay a significantly reduced fee. The City of Mississauga, I do believe the renewal fee is like $75 as an example. So, I mean, I do have these listed, but the list is quite lengthy. But the bottom line is that $500 is quite a lot of money for licensing, like to be an owner operator, especially if they're charitable entities. And I'm saying that not only on behalf of Diabetes Canada, to be very honest, I do believe that our other charitable partners feel the same way we do. So perhaps, like, again, another point that I had made, if it's not a good example, like, to perhaps pass on some of those costs to the for-profit entities, is perhaps to put like a limit, right? So like, maybe because in our particular case, it's going to be many thousands of dollars, maybe because we are a charitable entity, you would consider, and I'm just, I'm not, just as an example, like let's say $3,000 maximum, so that it will not go beyond that point, because it's understood that in principle, we are doing a good work on behalf of the community, and it's a collective impact for all of us. And that there should be perhaps maybe some shared expenses if those additional expenses are incurred. Yeah, so I hope that answers your question, Councillor.
Yeah, it does, Simon. And I'll follow up with questions to staff, but I also recognize that even as we changed our waste diversion policy, setting new limits on waste management. I've heard people say, well, I'm just going to take the stuff. I'm just going to take more stuff to either, thrift stores or to put it in bins, knowing that it's not stuff that you can recycle. So there will be additional pressures on you. So I'll reserve my remaining questions for staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So questions for the delegate, Councillor Plante, and then Hubley.
Oui, merci beaucoup. Mr. Langer, thank you so much for your presentation. I completely agree with you about reusing and buying secondhand. Anyone who has children knows how quickly they grow out of their clothes, and having, let's just say, access to that kind of saves your sanity, knowing there's going to be holes in them 10 minutes after you buy them. The other thing I just wanted to sort of highlight, because we do have one of your bins on Besserer in Sandy Hill. Just up the street from there is something called the Free Store at the University of Ottawa, and people just drop off items and they go in and pick out what they want, and it's run by students, and it's a really great resource in our community for this kind of circular economy that you're talking about. And not needing any sort of payment actually is easier. Like, people just go in, they take what they want, they drop off what they want. There's really no barrier whatsoever to contributing to the store. So I just wanted to highlight the good work that they're doing at the Free Store on my end of town. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubley, you're next.
Thank you very much. And thank you for coming out today. Diabetes Canada is one of the important charities that we have, and full disclosure, I'm a big supporter. I'd like to suggest that I'm open to your idea about some kind of a fee structure that in time recognizes the legitimate charities and perhaps can lower the costs in some sort of graduated way. However, I would hope that you would acknowledge that currently in Ottawa, we've got a very significant problem with bad actors in this field that are using charity numbers that don't correspond to what everyone would think of, such as Diabetes Canada as a legitimate charity that's doing good work in the community. The other thing we're hearing is they may list you as the charity that they're going to donate to, but they give you $100 and they've raised $10,000 in the clothing that they've collected. So it's an insignificant amount. There's no significant donation going to the charity. So I really like the work that staff have done here, because I think they're going to weed out those bad actors. I would hope that I can get you to acknowledge that that is a problem. And once we weed those bad actors out, it's going to be a better income stream for your charity, because there's going to be less players, if you will, in the field.
So again, thank you for your comments and questions, Councillor. I really do appreciate it. So one thing that I will raise is that in our experience, again, my role is national, and sorry, my dog is now jumping on me. This is bad timing. So one thing that I would raise, though, is that in our experiences, these, what I would describe as, using your words, bad apples, usually these are organizations that do not follow the rules regardless. So these bad apples exist in almost all of the municipalities that we collaborate and partner with. And for all of the ones that have these regulations for which we pay fees, and we actually have a division that's a part of my capacity. We have staff that this is a big part of their role, is to make sure that we are fulfilling our agreements with our municipalities, paying our permit fees on time, keeping them abreast of everything that is taking place, ongoing, etc. But then these other organizations are still within those jurisdictions, and they continue to behave exactly in the same manner. There is only really one or two municipalities for which has very strict enforcement rules, where if these organizations go ahead, place these bins on private and or public properties, that they are removed essentially automatically, like overnight. And in those cases, that's where this legislation, this type of bylaw regulations are successful. But that is very, very far and few between. In fact, I would say it's like less than 5%. And so that's also one of our concerns that I was looking to address during my presentation, is that, like, we pay these fees willingly, and you are such an important partner of ours, and we are forever grateful to staff that met and worked with us, and yourselves for your ongoing support and the kind words of yourself and your fellow councilors. But we want to be open with you all that this, in partnership, that we're worried that we're going to move forward with this regulation, or that will be the decision today or by council next week, and then we're going to arrive at the same place. So, really the way to deal with the bad apples is to inform the public that if they do not have the appropriate type of license, or if they not a legitimate, you utilize some of your words, your kind words, legitimate charitable or not-for-profit organizations, and doing due diligence with us, that these imposters, these charity masqueraders, will just continue to operate the same way they always have. That's why some municipalities have actually made decisions to only collaborate with charities and to only allow charities to actually have licenses to operate. Like there's many examples of that as well, where they do not even allow for-profit collectors to operate. So
that would be a great idea. Simon, I'm going to try to keep your answers briefer if we could here, so that we can move this along. Yes. I think it's important to acknowledge that Ottawa in the past has been a leader in this field. That we created one of the first significant bylaws. I know at the time there was other municipalities reaching out to our staff asking how we did that, and then adopting very similar ones. So I fully expect that if council supports this report here, that you're going to see other municipalities adopt a very similar one. We won't be the most expensive in 12 months' time. It'll be more like we're part of the theme across the province on how to deal with the bad actors and how to get them out of this. A couple of to close out, I've got a couple of questions to do with the numbers you presented. What's included in this reporting cost that you've added in there? What makes up that figure?
Well, I mean, it's just the time and effort of staff to, like, on a monthly basis, to go into our systems in order to pull out the appropriate locations, in order to make sure that those calculations are correct. We have offices all across the country. In this particular case, we have our local operation in Ottawa, based in Ottawa, and it's been there for a long time. And so, they have to cross-check, provide data to members of my team. And, when you take upon the salaries that are involved, and the reporting, et cetera, all in all, in a year, like, it doesn't take much today to get to arrive at $1,000. I think we'll all agree to that. So, we feel that it's a conservative estimate. We don't feel like we're being, frivolous in that estimate. And again, it's all charitable dollars. And so we're happy to provide that data. Like, the point of the argument being made, like, in fact, this is exactly what we do. Like, the majority of our formal municipal programs that we have across Canada, this is exactly what we do. But there's a further exchange of understanding where we get more locations. Like, there's other aspects to it which guarantee further revenue streams for us. And then that helps to cover those costs that we're taking on. So
Simon, which I hope you can acknowledge, that's what this report does too, is it helps the city cover the costs that it's costing taxpayers to administer this. Because I can tell you, at least in the last go round of this bylaw, there was a lot of councillors that were ready just to ban the boxes outright, and then you're going to lose all the possible income out of these boxes because of the problems. And you acknowledge it in your own cost, because you're saying $4,000 per box in waste that people are dropping off. Is that correct?
No, Councillor, that's total. That's total cost of
total cost for all your boxes.
4,000. Total estimated cost of dealing with, like, illegal dumping matters. So again, it's our pleasure to provide that service, and that's why we do that, because all of our hosts, including our municipal partners, where we place bins on public or private property, we do understand it's our responsibility to take care of our bins and to provide frequent service every week, multiple times per week, et cetera, in order to clear those items and keep them safe, et cetera. But again, there is a cost to that. And I think it's imperative that one looks as like, why is that happening? It's because in a lot of cases, not in every case, but in a lot of cases, residents in Ottawa and elsewhere, I'm not just pointing fingers at residents in Ottawa, they do so because they're trying to get around tipping fees. And so like,
right.
we are,
but that problem's going to exist no matter what we do today with that report. So that kind of muddies the water here, because that's an ongoing problem. However, if we get up to more enforcement, and as you suggested, where it's very clear rules about who can get involved now with the permit fees, it is going to take some of the bad actors out of here. They're going to have a lot of trouble coming up with legitimate charities and getting the letters from property owners. I think you'll acknowledge that a lot of these boxes turn up on property that people never gave them permission. They're just doing it. So these rules are going to help address all those problems. One last thing I want to ask, because I didn't see that in your costs here, but I've heard from other donation bin providers that it's a significant cost. Some of these bad actors have a habit of stealing your boxes and others' boxes, taking them to a site in rural Ottawa, repainting them in their own colors and putting them back out. Now that has to have a significant cost to use. So where would I find that in your list of costs? What did you account for that in?
Yeah, so you raise an important point. So I mean, I was trying to provide examples that are more of our every single day occurrences, but we most certainly, unfortunately, deal with these bad apples, again, using your term, Councillor, that are involved in those type of illegal behaviors. And it's very unfortunate. So I'm not there. There's no disagreement on that challenge. And yeah, so.
Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that, Simon. And Chair, that's all the questions I had. Thank you very much for coming out today.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councillor Hubley. Thank you, Mr. Langer, for your presentation. I think you provided some information and food for thought for committee members this morning. So thank you for your delegation.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we will turn to staff now for questions. And before my colleagues get going, maybe I can ask one about the cost structure, because that was raised by Diabetes Canada. Can you just explain to us how you got to what you're proposing as far as costs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So our recommended approach is a full cost recovery approach for the resources for our colleagues in bylaw and regulatory services to administer, manage, and enforce these new regulations. So the permit fee and the per box fee are meant to be scaled. So everyone pays the permit fee, but you pay a per box fee depending on your size. The idea behind that is that the bigger the operation, the more you have to pay. And this is consistent with other municipalities. While some municipalities discount the permit fee or the license fee, as the case may be, upon renewal, most of them continue to charge that annual box fee. That, of course, is because the more boxes there are out there, the more bylaw and regulatory staff have to administer the boxes, enforce them, inspect them, respond to service requests. We did consider whether we would be able to recommend a lower fee for charitable operators. But as has been said, we expect that the majority, if not all, the operators coming forward when this rolls out will be charities. So if we were to do that, I could not tell this committee or council that we'd achieve cost recovery. So permit fees are like user fees. And according to council's policy on user fees and charges, we are aiming for a full cost recovery. I will say that we're not asking council for any permanent FTEs. We've worked very closely with our colleagues in bylaw, and what they've recommended is going forward on a temporary staffing basis so that they can reassess this landscape once the program is well implemented and established.
Excellent. I think that was important for context as we contemplate our questions for you. Colleagues, I just want to inform you at noon, I must leave the chair's seat for a different function, and Vice Chair Hill will take the chair position at noon should this meeting continue at that point. So questions now, starting with Vice Chair Hill and then Councillors Hubley and Dudas.
Thank you very much for the work that went into this. Certainly, I'm very interested in this program in my ward as well. I echo a number of the comments that I heard from some of my council colleagues in terms of concern with kind of the wild west of what was. And I think that your report really addresses that. So I do very much appreciate the work that's gone into this program. Hearing the comments from our delegate, I do have a direction, if you'd be willing to accept that, that staff report back to committee at their next annual report on key performance indicators for this program, such as the number of sites registered, the amount of revenue generated, issues with program administration, and stakeholder feedback. Is that something you'd be willing to accept?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, I guess the only piece that I would add to that is just to clarify that it's for bylaw and regulatory services annual report. Otherwise, yes, we have that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I'll be supporting your report. Thank you.
Thank you. We will note that the direction will include that slight amendment. Okay, Councillor Hubley, you're next, and then Dudas Devine.
Thank you, and I support Councillor Hill's direction. That's a good addition in there. It's always good to take a look back after a year when we make changes to see if they're doing what they are intended to do. I also want to thank staff for their hard work on this. They really did cover off all the issues that the residents have raised. I think for new councillors, I would encourage you to talk to somebody that has one of these boxes near their home or has appeared on their business property without permission, and get their feedback on how big this issue is. You'll never hear complaints about Diabetes Canada, but you will hear from the bad actors complaints about what some of these people have done here. So I just want to take the time right now to thank staff for all their work, let them know I'm 100% supportive of what they're doing. I hope they like me can acknowledge what Diabetes Canada just said about the fees, and that as soon as we clean this area up, we can look at getting those fees back down for the charities. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, for your comments as well. Councillor Dudas, you're next.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask staff, and it was kind of alluded to a moment or so ago, but I just wanted some clarity. In terms of the half-time temporary full-time equivalent, the part-time position to be funded fees to do the enforcement, do you feel that that's going to be enough in terms of the enforcement aspect? There are a lot of these boxes. There are many complaints that come through in respect to this. Do you anticipate that that's enough to get you started, or do you think that you'll have to see that grow over time?
Mr. Chair, from a policy perspective, I can say we work very closely with our colleagues in bylaw and regulatory services to ensure just that these fees would cover what they need to get this program off to a successful start. But I would turn the councillor's question over to our representatives from bylaw and regulatory services to speak about capacity.
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. Yes, for the time being, I would say that it would be sufficient because we are already receiving the calls. So our staff is out there already monitoring the situation. This should help, or will help, clean up the issues at hand as outlined in the detailed policy report here today. So the answer is yes.
I'm glad to hear that, and I ask it specifically because I very much support this report and the opportunities in this to address some of the areas where our bylaw lacks. There was an issue on Saint Joseph Boulevard where there was a box there. It was being used as a dumping ground. I don't even remember the name of the charity, but the charity had actually been defunct for over 2 years and was not picking up anything. And we had engaged with yourselves. You were wonderful. It was addressed, but it took 2 years for it to be actually fixed because the private property owner was actually just putting everything in the garbage. So I think that there were some gaps in the bylaw we had before. I really do see that a lot of the work, the wonderful work you've done towards this will, close those gaps. But I do want to make sure that if we have a good bylaw, let's make sure we're enforcing it. So I look forward to seeing where that direction comes from, what the implications of that direction from Councillor Hill, because I do think going back and double checking and making sure that we're seeing the full benefits of this in a year from now. But I am very much in support of these recommendations, and I thank you for the work you've done.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks very much. Councillor Devine, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, generally I am very much in support of these recommendations, and I want to just link back to what Councillor Hubley was saying, in that these recommendations are going to address and recognize a lot of the concerns that residents raise, and I'm very, very appreciative of that. I really am just zeroing in on the implication that the proposals will have on charities. And I just want to focus on that a bit, because I do believe that we as the public sector, we can we benefit from these charitable works, and I think that we should make a distinction between how this bylaw will affect public versus private sector. So my first question, if a lot of these fees are going to be covering the cost for enforcement, and if, as Councillor Hubley was saying, it's not the Diabetes Canada that we have to be concerned with. It's not the good actors we have to be concerned with. It's the bad actors. Would staff, if the annual fee is meant to cover the cost of many things, including enforcement, and if the good actors don't require enforcement, would staff be willing to consider some kind of financing of this over multiple years, where a good actor that does not require any enforcement, that there's a discounted fee for second year, third year, and so forth?
Mr. Chair, speaking from a policy perspective, but I'd certainly turn it over to my bylaw colleagues in a minute. I'm not aware of any fee structure, of any user fee structure in a regulatory bylaw based on the ideas that the councillor has put forward. It is something that I think we'd have to take away to see how we could make that determination. So is it a less than 3 strikes, you get a discount? So it is something we could take away if that's the will of committee. But off the bat, I can't say that I have experience with that type of fee structure. And I think it would require further attention.
I understand that. I mean, I know that with some insurance companies I've been with, if I don't trigger a need for insurance, my rate goes down. If we're charging the good actors a fee based on enforcement that they never incur, to a certain extent, the good actors are subsidizing the bad actors. So I would like that to be considered by my colleagues. I think we should reward the good behavior. Carrying on in this direction, you make it very clear, and I understand, that the bulk of these bins are owned by the charitable sector. And so we can't really lower the fee for the charitable sector, because if we lower their fee, then we might not attain cost recovery. But in principle, if there's no possibility of lowering the fee for charitable, why can we not just, even as a matter of principle, to recognize the distinction between charitable and not, increase the fee for the private sector bins? Would that be something that staff would consider?
Mr. Chair, really, there's only one for-profit operator that we're aware of, maybe 2 through a partnership with a charity. So to put the user fee burden on that operator would likely be a significant burden for them. It's not something that we could recommend going forward. I would say, to be clear, that the permit fees will pay for the front end and the back end of the system. And what I mean by that, that FTE will be used to take in permits, to review consents, to review insurance, to populate that map that we're hoping to create on ottawa.ca. So that will benefit all operators. At the back end, enforcement, of course, will benefit the good operators as well, because it will get, hopefully, the bad operators out of the landscape. I will note that there are some offenses in the bylaw related to dumping, related to stealing. So enforcement support paid by these fee revenues will assist in enforcing those issues as well.
All right. Thank you. I'll just see if I can work with my colleagues on some kind of measure about rewarding the good behavior. But thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. And just as a reminder, the direction provided by the Vice Chair, I think will give us some important data after the first year. If the number of inquiries or bylaw matters plummets, then there may not be a need to have fees at the level that we've first established them. But again, it's all based on cost recovery at this point. So great questions. Councillor Johnson, your hand was up. It's now down. Are you okay? Okay. Before I provide my comments, would anyone else like to speak on this matter? Okay, well, colleagues, I too want to share my appreciation to staff for their good work. Council did direct them to do this work, and they've provided us a very sound proposal before us. The people of Ottawa support charity bins. They want to see charity bins, and they recognize the value that charity bins provide. And I do think there is a significant diversion element here. There's a lot of waste not going into the landfill because people have an opportunity in their community to go and drop household items and clothing off. And I do acknowledge that this is a revenue generator for charity. This is an important part of their revenue stream. But what we have in Ottawa and what I've seen is what I call the Wild West of charity bins. There are no true strong regulations in place. We don't know how many bins exist in the city of Ottawa. There's an estimate which staff have provided us. And I have seen countless bins where contents are all over the parking lot, where the garbage is dropped off, where reports of rats are in place. We have building code issues with the state of the bins itself in horrendous states of condition. And it becomes a blight on the community where there's just too many calls, too many emails about irresponsible bin owners. And I hope that's the minority. I really do. But we've had in my own ward issues where I've asked the bins to be removed because we just can't win that battle with whoever that bin owner was. So I do believe that the bylaw needs to be revised. I do believe this is a good proposal before us. And as I just said, I think the Vice Chair's direction to staff will give us some data that we truly need. So I wanted to provide my insight at this point. So the recommendation before us is that the committee approve the proposed clothing donation box bylaw as described in this report and the general form set out in document 1. Is this item carried?
Carried.
Carried.
Thank you. And thank you to staff again. Okay, item 7, in-camera items. There's no in-camera business today for this committee. Item 8, information previously distributed. This was a status update on short-term rental regulatory regime, as noted. Notices of motion. Any notices of motion? Notices of motion?
I don't have a notice of motion, but I did, if possible, Chair, can I make comment on item 8.1, the short-term rental regulatory regime?
Yep, that requires 2/3 support. The committee members allow us to lift this, so Councillor Hill can ask a question.
Carried.
Are we good? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go back to that item, Councillor Hill.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And this won't be anything too controversial. First, I just want to say, having looked at this in substantive detail, I'm very appreciative of the work that staff did on this report. I think it took us from a position where previous to 2019, our short-term rental market really represented the Wild West, complete unregulation. And this, I think, puts a good grip on improving compliance and getting the city of Ottawa into a space where short-term rentals are much, much better managed. And my question is, can we expect further updates on the status of the short-term rentals after we've received this report, essentially? Is there going to be a regular mechanism with which we can receive these key performance indicators so that we can make further decisions based on the total numbers and volumes that we're seeing and compliance numbers with regards to this bylaw?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for the question. Yes, we can put forward some updates in our annual report.
Thank you very much. That's my question, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair and Councillor Blunt.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much for this report. I do have a lot of short-term rentals in my area. So I was just wondering, after I looked through the report, and is there a collaboration between yourselves and like Vibro or Airbnb to look at the data of how long people are actually staying in the short-term rentals? And then my other question is, was there a discussion about increasing the licensing fee? Because I actually thought that was quite cheap, $65 a year for the license. I mean, people are charging $100 to $200 a night. So those are my two questions.
Through you, Chair. In terms of I'll answer the licensing question first. So in terms of the licensing fee being 65 a year, or breaking down to 65 a year, it's 110 over 2. In terms of that fee, the purpose or the goal behind the lower fee was to gain compliance. So the intent was to have those hosts apply to the city, obtain their permit, and from there we could evaluate down the road. So in working with Airbnb, as well as other groups in terms of, I guess, numbers, yes, we do work with them. We do have access to the data and the information in order to gauge and further review and evaluate as we go. And second question was in terms of, sorry, would you mind repeating that one?
No, I think you answered them.
Oh, okay.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much. Yeah. And I'm glad to hear that there is that collaboration between the service providers as well, because I think getting a good picture of, who's staying in hotels, who's staying in Airbnbs for how long. One of the things I've heard, and again, Councillor Johnson mentioned these things are kind of anecdotal, is that people are using Airbnbs to kind of circumvent the landlord and tenant board. So they're renewing every 30 days these leases. And then, that's a whole nother issue. That's a provincial issue, but definitely one we need to keep our eye on, especially as we are in a housing crisis. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hubley on this matter.
Thank you. Yes, on this matter, just based on what the previous council was saying, I just want to ask staff a question on this. We keep referring to this industry as Airbnb, but it's kind of like Xerox or Kodak in the past. Airbnb is one of I think it is the biggest and a legitimate player in this. But I think in the past, they've worked quite well with the city in trying to bring in regulations and similar to our last topic with the clothing bins, try to help us work with the bad actors in the industry. I wonder if they've made any progress in trying to get away from referring to all the short-term rentals as Airbnb, and maybe we should just start calling them short-term rentals and list a bunch of the companies that are involved in doing this. Like, could staff comment on that?
At present, only Airbnb is licensed with the City of Ottawa. So we do refer to Airbnb, but generally overall, within our group, or both the licensing and administration side, we do refer to them as short-term rentals. We are working with other platforms in terms of obtaining proper permits and licensing, as well as there has been unlicensed platforms that have been charged and are before the courts within the city. So yes, we do refer to short-term rental, and I will ensure that going forward, others also refer to them as that.
Thank you very much. And it's good to hear that you're following up on the ones on some charges have been laid. I appreciate your work on this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other hands, we will move from this item then. Item 9 is notices of motion. Any notices? Not seeing any at this point. Inquiries. I do believe Councillors Plant and Johnson have inquiries, which I would like you to read onto the record. So Councillor Plant, you're first.
Thank you very much, Chair. And this is via Councillor Carr, who sent it to me to read out loud to you. Bylaw Regulatory Services 2021 and 2022 annual report indicates 57,318 service requests received by Ottawa Bylaw and Regulatory Services in 2022, equivalent to 30735 service requests per FTE in Ottawa. All branches of bylaw and regulatory services have a role to play in enforcement and interpretation of city bylaws. Enforcement officers regularly engage with the public and provide information of city bylaws. Given this, could staff please answer the following questions? 1, what is training and certification requirements for bylaw enforcement officers? How often are officers required to recertify training and certifications? How are the different branches of bylaw trained in policy and bylaw interpretation? How are the changes in legal opinion communicated to enforce staff and throughout the department? Merci, Councillor Carr.
Thank you. And did you have a second one?
The one, the inquiry that we talked about earlier, Caitlin?
Mr. Chair, I believe Councillor Plante had referenced an inquiry about fire services earlier, and it would be appropriate to ensure that's on the record now.
Great, thank you. I'll read it. Just give me a sec.
It is on the screen now.
Oh, even better. Okay. Thank you. Inquiry, cost of overdose response. What is the cost to Ottawa Fire Service to attend an overdose, including truck leaving the station? So to clarify, this is the kilometers. Firefighter cost per hour. Do they wait till an ambulance comes? Do they drive the patient to the hospital? Trucks to go back to the station. So again, the kilometrage, any equipment used, and please also expand these costs to include other emergency and protective services such as paramedics and bylaw. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Councillor. Any others from you? No. All right, Councillor Johnson.
The purpose of Ottawa Fire Services annual report is to meet the requirements under the Fire Services Establishing Bylaw number 2009-319. However, equity, diversity, and inclusion, EDI, are also essential components of reflecting the community we serve. EDI practices ensure that the services being provided are fair and accessible to all individuals. Can staff report back on what strides have been made to build equity, diversity, and inclusion both in the workplace and operationally as follows? Can staff provide 5-year trends for the following demographics, both for career firefighters and volunteer firefighters? Percentage identified as female, percentage identified as Indigenous, percentage identified as a member of a racialized group, percentage French speaking, percentage of members who speak more than 2 languages. Can staff provide a detailed summary of how EDI principles are being incorporated into recruitment and hiring practices, including what outreach efforts are being undertaken to target traditionally underrepresented communities? Are applicants provided with an opportunity to self-identify as being from an equity-seeking group in the application process? Are efforts being made to ensure hiring panels are representative of diverse lived experiences, including gender, race, and ethnicity? When staff are undertaking volunteer recruitment efforts, what consideration is given to candidates' professional and family commitments in relation to the availability to respond to calls? Is a gender equity lens applied to this analysis to ensure that female candidates do not face discrimination because of caregiving responsibilities? Can OFS share about any other partnerships, engagement, or learning and awareness initiatives that support increased diversity within the service? And finally, in 2020, Ottawa Fire Service made changes to the minimum hiring qualifications for career firefighters, requiring mandatory fire and medical certifications to be obtained prior to the application deadline. Has this decision resulted in fewer candidates from traditionally underrepresented groups submitting applications? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, for your inquiry. Any other inquiries from any other members? Seeing none, any other business for today's meeting? Before we adjourn, just a heads up about October. So the next meeting is October 19th. At that meeting, we will consider the Emergency and Protective Services Minor Amendments Report, another report from the Bylaw Review Work Plan, and an update to Ottawa Paramedic Services Safe Alternative Transportation Pilot. Our November meeting will be dedicated to consideration of the 2024 draft budget. And finally, I'd like to remind everyone listening that now is the time to check your smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. Ottawa Fire Services recently completed their Wake Up, Get a Working Smoke Alarm door knocking campaign, and October 8th to 14th is Fire Prevention Week. Everyone should have a smoke alarm and carbon monoxide alarm on each floor of their home and outside of sleeping areas. Only a working alarm can save your life. So I look forward to seeing you at these meetings this autumn. And with no other business before us today, our meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.